Ever wondered how crucial government policies are in resource allocation and correcting market failure? It's like a conductor guiding an orchestra to harmony. Economies, just like orchestras, require direction to ensure resources are efficiently allocated and markets function optimally. However, sometimes markets fail. This happens when resources aren't allocated efficiently, leading to a loss of economic and social welfare. Market failures can take many forms, including monopolies, public goods, and externalities. In these scenarios, the invisible hand of the market needs a helping hand, and that's where government intervention comes in. Governments can apply various tools and strategies to correct these failures and restore equilibrium. From indirect taxes to subsidies, price controls to production quotas and beyond, these measures aim to optimize resource allocation and ensure fair play. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into specific measures employed by governments to tackle market failure. First up, we have indirect taxes, but how do they help? Let's dive into the world of economics and explore two types of indirect taxes, namely specific and ad valorem indirect taxes. Specific indirect taxes are flat rates applied to each unit of a product. Think of it like a fixed charge added to every bottle of wine sold, regardless of its price. This type of tax is useful when the government wants to discourage consumption of certain goods, like alcohol or tobacco. On the other hand, ad valorem indirect taxes are based on the value of the product. For example, a 10% tax on a luxury car would be significantly more than on an economy car. These taxes are often used to address income inequality, as they generally have a greater impact on wealthier individuals. Through these case studies, we see how indirect taxes can correct market failures by influencing consumer behavior and promoting social equality. As we've seen, indirect taxes can be a powerful tool in the government's arsenal. Subsidies and price controls, two more ways governments can step in. Let's start with subsidies. Subsidies are essentially financial aid that governments provide to companies or industries. The purpose? To keep the prices of goods and services low, stimulate production, or support certain sectors that are considered vital for the economy or society. For instance, agriculture often receives substantial subsidies as it's essential for food security. Here's a case study. A government may subsidize renewable energy companies to encourage them to produce more, making clean energy more affordable. This is a strategy to correct the market failure of negative externalities, where the production or consumption of goods and services has harmful effects on third parties, in this case, the environment. On the other hand, we have price controls. Governments set maximum or minimum prices for certain goods or services. These are known as price ceilings and price floors respectively. For instance, a government may implement a price ceiling on essential goods like bread or milk during a crisis to ensure affordability. This action can prevent the market failure of monopolies or oligopolies, where a single or a small number of firms dominate the market, leading to high prices and reduced consumer welfare. Similarly, a price floor can be set for wages, known as a minimum wage, to ensure workers receive a fair income. This can correct the market failure of income inequality. However, while subsidies and price controls can be effective in theory, they can also lead to unintended consequences. Subsidies may lead to inefficiencies if firms become reliant on them and don't strive to improve their productivity. Price controls can lead to shortages or surpluses if the controlled price is set too low or too high compared to the equilibrium price. Hence, it's crucial that these tools are used judiciously with careful consideration of their potential impacts. Hence, subsidies and price controls can play a significant role in correcting market failure. What about quotas, prohibitions, and licenses? Do they make a difference? Let's delve into these tools and see how they work in the battle against market failure. Production quotas are a classic tool. They limit the quantity of a specific product that a firm, industry, or country can produce. This might seem counterproductive at first. Why would we want to limit production? Well, consider the fishing industry. If we allow unlimited fishing, we risk depleting fish stocks to dangerous levels. By setting a quota, we can ensure the sustainability of the fish population while still providing a livelihood for fishers. Prohibitions are another tool, and they're exactly what they sound like. A total ban on the production, sale, or consumption of a particular good or service. Think of substances like certain recreational drugs or products like ivory. These are banned because of the societal harm they can cause. Prohibitions can be effective, but they come with their own set of challenges, such as driving the prohibited activity underground into illegal markets. Then, there are licenses. These are permissions granted by the government that allow entities to engage in activities that would otherwise be illegal. Licenses can be used to regulate industries and protect consumers. For instance, in the pharmaceutical industry, companies need licenses to sell drugs. This ensures that only safe and effective medications make it to the market, protecting public health. But are these measures always effective? Like anything else, they have their pros and cons. Quotas can protect resources but can also lead to inefficiencies if set too low. Prohibitions can reduce harm but may also create illicit markets. Licenses can ensure quality but might stifle competition if too restrictive. The effectiveness of these measures depends greatly on the specific context, the industry, and how these policies are implemented and enforced. They're not a one-size-fits-all solution, but rather part of a larger toolkit that governments can use to correct market failures. So, these measures too have their place in the war against market failure. Now let's turn our attention to regulation, deregulation, and direct provision. Regulation is a tool used by governments to control and supervise the workings of the market. This can take the form of rules, laws, or directives that set boundaries on the behavior of businesses and individuals. For instance, in the case of a monopoly, a government might regulate prices to ensure they remain fair for consumers. On the other hand, deregulation is the process of removing or reducing state regulations. This may stimulate competition and innovation, as seen in the telecommunications industry in the late 20th century. Direct provision, on the other hand, is when the government steps in to provide goods or services directly to the public. This is often seen in areas where the private market may fail to provide efficiently or equitably, such as healthcare or education. Each of these tools has its own strengths and weaknesses when it comes to tackling market failure. Let's consider a few case studies. In the 1980s, the airline industry in the United States was deregulated. This led to an increase in competition, which in turn lowered prices and made air travel accessible to a larger portion of the population. However, it also led to instability in the industry, with many airlines going bankrupt. In contrast, the Clean Water Act of 1972 is an example of regulation. The law set standards for water quality and penalized polluters. As a result, water quality in the United States greatly improved. However, some critics argue that the costs of compliance were too high for small businesses. In terms of direct provision, consider the National Health Service in the United Kingdom. This publicly funded healthcare system ensures that everyone has access to healthcare regardless of their ability to pay. Yet it's also faced criticism over long wait times and limited resources. As we've seen, these measures can be very effective in tackling market failure. However, they must be carefully crafted to balance the benefits of intervention with potential drawbacks. Scene script. But what happens when government interventions fail? Let's find out. Government failure in the context of microeconomics is when government intervention in the economy leads to an inefficient allocation of resources and a decrease in social welfare. This is often the unintended consequence of policies designed to correct market failures. Let's start with the causes of government failure. One of the primary causes is a lack of information. Governments may not have all the necessary information to make informed decisions. For instance, they may underestimate the demand for a certain good or service, leading to overproduction and waste. Another cause is political influence and pressure. Policies may be influenced more by political considerations than by economic logic. For example, a government may choose to subsidize an inefficient industry merely to protect jobs and win votes, leading to an inefficient use of resources. Now, on to the consequences of government failure. The most direct consequence is the inefficient allocation of resources. This can result in overproduction of some goods and underproduction of others, leading to a misallocation that can harm both consumers and producers. Government failure can also lead to inequity. Policies such as subsidies may favor certain groups over others, leading to an unfair distribution of resources. For instance, a subsidy for homeownership may benefit the wealthy more than the poor, exacerbating income inequality. Lastly, government failure can lead to fiscal burden. Inefficiencies and misallocations can be costly, putting a strain on government budgets and potentially leading to higher taxes or reduced public services. Let's consider a case study: the U.S. government's ethanol policy. This policy, intended to reduce dependence on foreign oil and lower greenhouse gas emissions, led to an overproduction of corn for ethanol. This caused food prices to rise globally, harming consumers, particularly in developing countries. This is a classic example of government failure. So, while government policies can correct market failure, they can also lead to government failure if not properly implemented. We have seen a multitude of ways in which governments can intervene to correct market failure, from indirect taxes and subsidies that adjust prices to production quotas and licenses that control supply. Price controls can be applied to manage affordability, while regulations and deregulation help maintain market balance. Governments can also directly provide goods and services, or employ pollution permits and property rights to manage resources. Nationalization and privatization can be used to alter the control of industries, while the provision of information and the nudge theory can guide consumer behavior. However, it's essential to note that these interventions can sometimes lead to government failure. This can arise from a lack of information, bureaucratic inefficiency, or unintended consequences. So, while the government can play a significant role in correcting market failure, it's crucial to remember that these interventions must be carefully planned and executed to avoid government failure.